Listen,
Never in my life associated the word boring with baseball.
we know what's up.
Me? Yeah. Famous? Yeah.
And I'm like giddy over there smiling like, we're about to win this shit.
Did everyone give you crap? Give me a good host story.
I'm not picking it up.
We both love the game.
We talk about it every day.
Get on baseball.
Having some popcorn, you're fooling around your phone.
I'd have to wait in line for 3 hours.
Hang on, because it's about to be a wild ride.
All right, joining me now, I got one of my favorite guys, Red Sox hitting coach, Pete Fatse. Pete, you just ran a half marathon?
Half marathon, yeah. So
half marathon, yeah. So you're a little bit wiped out right now. So I appreciate you joining.
Of course, anything for you.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk about just hitting and the process of what you implement and stuff like that. And what comes to mind for me was a conversation I was having with Dom Smith earlier in the year, and he was talking about how throughout his career he's been like this. He's sort of struggled at finding his way in the major leagues in terms of, who he is as a hitter. And he said that you went back and looked at his tape from high school, actually, and was like, hey, what happened to this guy? And so just where does that come from with your ability to be able to look at things and just even go back that far? I mean, he was saying he's more of a handsy hitter. And he wasn't necessarily a guy that can launch like that. Just so, what sparked you to do that, and what goes into all of that?
Yeah, I think obviously Dom's path to us is a little unique in a sense that he was coming from AAA with the Rays and kind of inserted with an opportunity to play a lot with us. And I know the last few years, he was still trying to find himself, working really hard to kind of figure things out. And I think it was more of a timing thing. Obviously, the big leagues will do that to you, right? It'll test you and it will challenge you and it'll beat you up, spit you out. And I think a big part of having success in the big leagues is understanding what makes you really, and made you a big leaguer and has made you have success, right? Dom Smith, he's a player that clearly had success earlier in his minor league career, earlier in his big league career. He was just kind of trying to find his stride. And I think kind of the process that I take with every hitter we have, we really try and make sure we have an understanding of the whole picture, right? Not just who they are right now, but where they came from, ultimately. And I think that really matters because I think a lot of times with especially big league guys, they've all had success at one point doing, with their swing or with their moves. And it's our job to kind of peel back the layers and get an understanding of why. So it was really me taking probably a little bit more of an extreme look in Dom's case, but when I looked at him, I saw him moving completely different, earlier in his career than what he does now. And he wasn't, he was a 18, 19-year-old kid at that point. So we don't expect him to move the exact same way. But some of the key features that we look for, the markers were a little different. So it kind of, stirred up a conversation. Obviously, I think it built trust because he understood I was invested in his success and a willingness to go back quite a few years into some tape. Kind of get to the bottom of some things, and he did a really nice job implementing. Obviously, for us, and it was great while we had him.
You mentioned trust. How much does it take to sort of build that trust with a player or a hitter? Does it take them having success? Does it take them having and just feeling something different? How do you get to trust?
Yeah, I would say it obviously it depends on the player, and I think ultimately where they're coming from. I think sometimes you get players who feel like their trust has been abused in the past in other places, so you have to be careful of that. I think the thing that separates our staff from most, obviously, I think we do a really nice job with our guys, but we take time to understand the player, and I think we try to leave no stone unturned as far as I guess you'd call it like our evaluation process of where their swing's at, where their approach is at, where their performance ultimately is. So I think for us, building relationships that are strong and that players know we're here for them. Ultimately, we want to win games and we want to win a World Series, but we're here to help them be the best version of themselves. That's something that's very obvious. I think if you walk into our building, it stems from what AC preaches all the way down to us. So, I just think that trust is invaluable because ultimately you may have the best information, you may have a fantastic idea, but the reality is putting it into play is not going to matter if you don't get buy-in. And I think that's really important, especially at the big league level, because you got to remember these guys have all had success at one point or another to get to this point. it's our job to understand what makes them good and help them just bring that out as much as possible.
Jarren has obviously had a great season. He should be in line for what I think is the Silver Slugger Award for one of the three positions. But I think he talked to Bradford actually about sort of making the adjustment when he's tired, and that you guys had to talk about those things in terms of like just little movements and things that he can do to sort of, compensate for him being a little bit exhausted because he played 160 games. What were some of those key movements that you wanted him to get to be able to deal with the fatigue that obviously comes with the game with 162 games?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, I think the work he did, especially with Ben Rosenthal, one of my assistants, like the relationship they forged over the last year, the investment in time to each other. I think that was extremely important for Jarren for taking these next steps. And obviously talk about trust, like, that bond between him, myself, our staff, like, I think that's been a really important piece. But for Jarren, I go back to something that Justin Turner said while he was here. I thought it was it was a really interesting way of putting something we see on a day-to-day basis is, no hitter is exactly the same when they walk through the doors every single day. So you have to get an understanding of where they're at. And that might be, somebody's playing a career high in innings. Maybe there was an extra inning game last night or a late flight, some back's a little cranky. And I think part of what, being a big leaguer is about, and part of what separates, talent at the big league level is learning how to manage your body and knowing when you need more, knowing when you need to back off. Jarren's not a guy that's going to shy away from work. I mean, I think that's well documented at this point. But I think one thing that's been key to this process is Jarren getting a better understanding of himself. I think, yes, he does rely on external eyes, and I think that's important, and people have to have, eyes on you, and you have to trust those people around you. But he's done a fantastic job of getting a better understanding of where he's at. I think the most valuable things with Jarren are always with his lower half, making sure he's in a position where he's strong with his lower half, especially with the leg lift. When we started to implement the leg lift, I think against Tampa, I can't remember specifically the date, but just making sure he's doing it, not coming up out of the ground. He's got a pretty exaggerated forward move. So I think sometimes when the load gets off, or if his legs are tired, he might have a tendency to crash, and that puts him kind of underneath the ball, a little bit more uphill than he wants to be. I think that's kind of the daily, thermostat for us, is just understanding, hey, where are the legs at today, and as the season went on and progressed, obviously there's going to be more fatigue. So it's kind of balancing workload at that point. But again, we never get away from making sure we're swinging at pitches, we're attacking pitches over the middle of the plate, right? Simplifying our approach. I think for him, he's an area guy. He looks for the ball in a certain spot. And then we have an external target or something he's trying to do to the ball, line drive over the shortstop, fly ball off the wall, whatever it is. And it's just kind of the pairing of those things together throughout the day.
You talked about his leg kick, and I remember when he first came up, he sort of had this exaggerated move, but you guys got him into a place where he was sort of got his front foot down earlier. I said, like, it was almost like the survival mode, right? Of like, okay, I just need to stay in the big leagues, get used to like this pitching, whatever. And this is like, I need to stay in the big leagues. And then he graduated to, I think, the leg kick, which is like, okay, you guys just like, it's like you like let the Lamborghini loose. That's what I always like, sort of like frame it as. It's like, it just seemed like it was like a guy that was like, okay, we're building now, go. What was that conversation like when he implemented the leg kick?
Yeah, I think, I feel like, I've had the ability to be with Jarren once he got called up in New York all the way to now. I think there's a lot of pressure on Jarren too early, right? When he was coming up, I think in 21, I think he was with Team USA playing, and I believe we were on the West Coast, and we were kind of grinding through our schedule. I feel like a couple guys, maybe it was Marlon Gonzalez that had been hurt, or, something like that. So we were in a tough stretch, and I remember hearing, obviously I was with Jarren in spring training. He put on a show. I mean, he hit a bunch of homers, looked great, fantastic athlete, hard worker, right? So everybody's kind of like, hey, this guy's going to come up and, you're just going to get injected the lineup and here we go, and I think that's a lot on the kid, especially, on a team that has playoff aspirations. And I think like that's something now that I've become more seasoned, I'm more aware of, you just being mindful of when these kids come up, and it's like, hey, yes, we're going to, obviously the goal is to win every night. We got to put up results, but, being mindful of the situation. So I think you're right. There was a little bit of a survival mechanism. You come up initially, you kind of get punched in the mouth, and it's like, does it work? Or do I belong here? All those doubts start to fill in your mind. Fast forward to last year, 2023, the documented like hands conversation. The reality was, if you go back and look at his minor league kind of career early on when he was hitting 380 in his first full season of baseball, I mean, his hands were low. He still had like a little modified leg lift, but his hands were low. And I felt like, despite where he dropped his hands to, I believe it was after the 2020 kind of COVID abbreviated stretch there at the alt site. I felt like you just watch, and his body still wants to organize and get those hands in the similar position. So the conversation was like, why don't we just start him there? Why don't we just eliminate some of the excessive moves, having to bring them up, and then it's just another timing mechanism that you have to battle, right? So we got some help with PD2 in spring training, which was great. But I think ultimately the leg lift for him, it's kind of like it's just a way for him to start slow and early, right? It's when he had a shorter move, and you guys see him play. He's a very fast twitch, aggressive kind of athlete. It's like, I think the leg lift just provided him a little bit of flow, so to speak. And it just got him to get going early. Sometimes we forget a lot of the breakdowns in the swing happen because we're late and we're trying to compensate for that. So once he kind of got to the point, I can't remember who it was before Tampa, but once he got to the point of recognition, like, hey, I need to get going. Like, I got to get my backside. I got to get going. He's the one that kind of brought it up again to our attention. We're like, hey man, like, let's let it loose, see what happens. Started back. He had the backside double off the wall. Like, I think it doubled the center, and it was just like, we go now. And it's been extremely fun to watch. But that's kind of the evolution of a hitter over the course of 2-3 years in the big leagues. He's now figuring out he's a pretty dang good player.
When you look at like somebody like Rafi, right, and sort of him having to play through what he played through toward the end of the season, and we could all see that like he was grinding through it, right? Like, from your perspective, like, just how hard was it to watch him sort of grind through that? Because I mean, at times you could tell he was in some pain, but then somehow he just ended up just going back out there until he obviously couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it goes without saying, that guy is an absolute beast. He's a grinder. He posts. He's tough as nails. So, like, I think anytime you're dealing with a player that's going through something like that, like, you're obviously going into conversations, understanding where the player's at, but like, to watch him go out there and just to compete because he knew what we were fighting for, it says everything you need to know about the guy. So I think for me in those moments, yeah, I mean, there's obviously things we noticed with the swing and the approach. Guys were taking advantage of the four seam up and trying to exploit that underplane miss. And, I don't want to say it is what it is, but like, it was just a really challenging month and change of baseball. And I'm sure there's some, I don't know how many players, might have said, hey, I need some downtime. I need 10 days, 2 weeks. I need to get myself, better before we continue this thing. And he continued to press on. He continued to post, play every day. And, obviously he set the tone and he set the standard for how we do things here too. Obviously we don't want guys to be hurt, but, like, battling and persevering when it matters, like, that sends a signal to the rest of the group. Very similar to Jarren posting and playing 160 games. Like, it sends a message that this is what we're about, and I think Rafi's an embodiment of that.
Last few questions. When I was actually, it's still on the topic of Rafi, but when I was watching him, I was like, before he got hurt, it was like, whoa, like, this is scary. Like, this now it seems like he's sort of, I don't know, I wouldn't say reaching his ceiling, but it was peak performance Rafi, better than I have ever seen. Like, bat to ball skills, wasn't chasing. Back spinning the ball the other way. What's his ceiling?
I mean, you saw he was roughly at 1,000 OPS before the Colorado, or right around Colorado, when he made that play to his left and had this, had the issue with the other shoulder. I mean, this guy is capable of 950 OPS. I think the thing that stands out is, the 12.3 walk rate this year. Yeah. Obviously, the punch outs went up a little bit to, like, I think he might have been finished right around 23%, a couple percentage points over league average, but like, at his peak, he was striking out at like 20%, walking at 12 to 13%. I mean, he was taking advantage of when guys were going outside the zone and just taking his walks. And I also felt like, obviously, he's a guy that can do damage to the pull side, and we value that. But at home, early on, I mean, he was wearing out left center field, which was something we had talked about with the adjustment with his hands and trying to be shorter and like trusting that you can miss balls at Fenway to left center and still hit homers and doubles. And I felt like him doing that really allowed him to see the ball longer, and he became comfortable making decisions kind of later in ball flight, things like that. Like he just let the ball travel more. But like, I mean, his ceiling's 950 OPS, 1,000. I mean, I say it every year. Like Rafael Devers should be in the MVP conversation every year. Like he's a terrific player.
100%. When you two last questions, I know you because I know you're wiped
no
out.
worries, man. No worries.
When you look at the like sort of the game and where it is, right? You guys talked about for a long time it was north south, and now it seems guys are expanding more east west. What's the counter to that as a hitter?
I can't give away all my secrets now, but
all right.
No. So I think in general terms, right? Like, I mean, you see it every night. It seems like every starter is adapting and throwing a third fastball, right? It's like the guy's got a four seam, he's got a two seam that runs, and he's got a cutter. Or the guy throws a sinker, he throws like a running four seam in on the hands to righties, and then maybe they add the cutter in, right? But it seems like you're almost as a hitter now, you have to cover three different fastballs within your game plan as a starting pitchers. Bullpen arms are obviously more specific, but I think what it comes down to is you can look at efficiency a bunch of different ways, I guess is the best way to put it. Like you can look at, does the swing produce hard hit balls, which is extremely important, right? Like the harder you hit the ball, the better the production generally. Does the swing have enough loft to hit a ball in the air, like maximizing line drive fly ball? There's definitely a balance to how you do that. And I think the game on the offensive side pivoted to like guys are sinker slider, let's get the ball in the air. Homers are most valuable, right? And that's like our north-south kind of vertical path, like get the ball in the air. And then it was like, oh man, we're going to exploit four seams to the top. So now you have a bunch of guys swinging almost flat or like down. And I think it really comes down to the truth is always somewhere in the middle, right? Like we obviously want to hit the ball hard. We want to hit the ball square. We want to hit the ball like on a line. I think that like the way we do that is we have to minimize our margin for error. Let's put it that way. We have to shorten up some element of the swing so that we can minimize. And I think a lot of it is minimizing the underplane miss, right? Like when the ball is above the bat, just because I feel like a lot of the four seam or cutter misses you see obviously are in that fashion. And then, it's also a game planning thing, is kind of like knowing who the guy on the mound is and kind of what you're going to be taking your shots on.
When you look at this season that you guys had and the hitters that you guys developed, obviously you guys did a lot with rookies, guys who was out there in the big leagues for the first time. Are there any guys that stand out to you that you're excited about taking that next step next year that you saw from this year?
Absolutely. I felt like, you look at the over. I mean, the reality is we didn't. We were a 500 team, right? Like we didn't finish the way we wanted to. That goes without saying. We all know that at this point. But I think from an offensive production standpoint, you look at team-wide OPS, you look at our runs per game, and it puts us in a category that's pretty strong, right? It's around or at or slightly above some other playoff offenses. But I think the next step for us. Really, I mean, I think the big thing was our Achilles heel was the strikeout percentage for me. I think that's what kind of some of the whiff that we had. I think those pockets are when you're swinging and missing, especially against a lead arm, sometimes it becomes challenging to battle. Obviously, we did slug, so there's a trade-off there as well. I think a guy that stands out that we haven't even seen close to the best possible version of is, I think, Ceddanne. I think there's a whole other level to Ceddanne. His athletic. We saw it. There were glimpses where you can see the type of player. I think he has a better understanding of what it takes to play a full season. 162, better idea of who he is as a player too. I think there's another gear, William Abreu too. That is all-star. That is, he is obviously we know what he can do on the defensive front, but I think there's another gear for him there as well. One that's kind of probably a little obvious, maybe, but more so because of the injury. But Trevor Story, I say that again going into this year, like. He's gonna be in great physical condition. He knows what he needs to work on. He's gonna work tirelessly at it. He's gonna push the guys around him. Like, I think there's obviously another level there that hopefully he's on. Obviously, we anticipate him being on the field day one and ready to go.
Cool, Pete. Thanks so much, man. Thanks for joining. I appreciate it.
No doubt. Thanks for having me.